Instructional Planning. This PowerPoint presentation was adapted from Classroom Assessment, Concepts and Applications, Instructional Planning and Assessment, Chapter 3. Education is the process of helping to change students' knowledge and behavior in desired ways. The purpose of schools is to educate students, but what does it mean to educate? To educate means to help students change and to help them learn and do new things. Curriculum describes the skills, performances, knowledge, and attitudes students are expected to learn in school. The curriculum contains expectations or learning outcomes, which are statements of desired student learning, and descriptions of the methods and materials that will be used to help students attain this. The methods and processes actually used to change students' behavior are called instruction. Lectures, discussions, worksheets, cooperative projects, and homework are but a few of the instructional techniques used to help students learn. Achievement refers to school-based learning, while ability and aptitude refer to broader learning acquired mostly through non-school sources such as parents and peer groups. Teacher and student characteristics. When planning instruction, teachers should take their own characteristics and knowledge into account along with their students' characteristics and the time and resources available. Teacher characteristics. Subject matter knowledge, personality, and physical limitations are important factors in planning and delivering instruction. The topics teachers choose to cover, the accuracy and relevancy of their topical coverage, and their teaching methods all are influenced by their own knowledge limitations. Teachers' personalities often lead them to favor certain instructional techniques over others. Teaching is a rigorous, fatiguing activity. Teachers should consider their own physical limitations when planning instruction. Student characteristics. Initial and extremely important considerations when planning instruction are the present status and needs of the students. What are they developmentally ready to learn? What topics have they mastered thus far in the subject area? How complex are the instructional materials they can handle? How well do they work in groups? What exceptionalities do they have and how are they accommodated? What is the range of students' culture and language in a given classroom? What are their learning styles? Please take the time to review this chart on areas to consider when planning instruction, student and teacher characteristics. Steps in the instructional process. The instructional process involves 3 interdependent steps: planning, delivering, and assessing. Step 1. Planning. Planning includes identifying specific expectations or learning outcomes, selecting materials to foster these expectations or outcomes, and organizing learning experiences into a coherent, reinforcing sequence. Step 2. Delivering. Teaching content to the students. Step 3. Assessing. Involves assessing how well students learn or achieve the expectations or outcomes. Three levels of teaching objectives. In our everyday activities, objectives help us focus on what's important. They remind us of what we want to accomplish. Instructional objectives describe the kinds of content and processes teachers hope their students will learn from instruction. The first of these 3 objectives is global objectives. Global objectives, often called goals, are broad, complex student learning outcomes that require substantial time and instruction to accomplish. They are very general, encompassing a large number of more specific objectives. Examples include: the student will become a lifelong learner. The student will become mathematically literate. Students will learn to use their minds well so that they may be prepared for responsible citizenship, further learning, and productive employment. The second type of teaching objectives are educational objectives. Educational objectives are more specific than global objectives. They are sufficiently narrow to help teachers plan and focus teaching, and sufficiently broad to indicate the richness of the objective and to suggest a range of possible student outcomes associated with the objective. Examples include: the student can interpret different types of social data. The student can correctly solve addition problems containing 2 digits. The student distinguishes between facts and hypotheses. The third type of teaching objective is instructional objectives. Instructional objectives focus teaching on relatively narrow topics of learning in a content area. These concrete objectives are used in planning daily lessons. Examples include: the student can correctly punctuate sentences. Given 5 problems requiring the student to find the lowest common denominator of a fraction, the student can solve at least 4 or 5. The student can list the names of the U.S. states and capital cities. Please take a moment to look at this chart comparing the 3 levels of teaching objectives: global, educational, and instructional. The 3 domains of objectives. By this point, it should be clear that objectives are logically and closely tied to instruction and assessment. In addition to differing in terms of level, classroom objectives and their related instruction and assessments differ in terms of 3 general types of human behavior: the cognitive, affective, and psychomotor domains. The cognitive domain. The most commonly taught and assessed educational objectives are those in the cognitive domain. The cognitive domain includes intellectual activities such as memorizing, interpreting, applying, problem-solving, reasoning, analyzing, and thinking critically. Virtually all the tests that students take in school are intended to measure one or more of these cognitive activities. Teachers' instruction is usually focused on helping students attain cognitive mastery of some content or subject area. Bloom's taxonomy. What is Bloom's taxonomy? Bloom's taxonomy is a system of cognitive processes organized into 6 levels, with each successive level representing a more complex type of cognitive process. Here is a simple pyramid chart on Bloom's taxonomy. Take the time to look at the following chart: types of cognitive processes identified in Bloom's taxonomy: knowledge, comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. The affective domain. A second behavioral domain is the affective domain. The affective domain involves feelings, attitudes, interests, preferences, values, and emotions. Emotional stability, motivation, trustworthiness, self-control, and personality are all examples of affective characteristics. Although affective behaviors are rarely assessed formally in schools and classrooms, teachers constantly assess affective behaviors informally. Teachers need to know who can be trusted to work unsupervised and who cannot, who can maintain self-control when the teacher has to leave the classroom and who cannot, who needs to be encouraged to speak in class and who does not, who is interested in science but not in social studies, and who needs to be prodded to start classwork and who does not. Most classroom teachers can describe their students' affective characteristics based on their informal observations and interactions with the students. The psychomotor domain. A third behavioral domain is the psychomotor domain. The psychomotor domain includes physical and manipulative activities: shooting a basketball, setting up laboratory equipment, building a bookcase, word processing, holding a pencil, Buttoning a jacket, brushing teeth, and playing a musical instrument are all examples of activities that involve psychomotor behaviors. Although psychomotor behaviors are present and important at all levels of schooling, they are especially stressed in the preschool and elementary grades, where tasks like holding a pencil, opening a locker, and buttoning or zippering clothing are important to master. Similarly, with certain special needs students, a major part of education involves so-called self-help skills, such as getting dressed, attending to personal hygiene, and preparing food, all of which are psychomotor accomplishments. Planning for students with exceptionalities. Student exceptionalities, and particularly student accommodations, are very important aspects that must be addressed in a teacher's instructional planning. Accommodations for students with exceptionalities. When planning content, if students have fallen behind in the curriculum, teach what is most generalizable. Teach learning strategies along with teaching content. Select content based on student interest. For example, allow students to read the sports page to practice reading skills. Accommodations when planning objectives. Pre-test before teaching to make sure that the objectives are appropriate for the students. Determine whether an objective can be altered for some students. For example, can students who have poor writing skills demonstrate their knowledge orally? Accommodations. When deciding on instructional methods, recognize that students with some learning and behavioral exceptionalities often need very explicit directions. Evaluate the level of structure students need to be successful. Do not assume that all students learn best with unstructured approaches. If students have fallen behind in the curriculum, use time-efficient methods. Be sure students have the necessary skills to be successful with the instructional method being used. Accommodations when planning the lesson. Provide directions, procedures, and rules. Describe them orally and in writing. Follow up by asking questions or by having students repeat or paraphrase what they are to do. Repeat keywords often, using the same wording. Ask for frequent active responses. Break up information. Teach a couple of steps. Practice. Teach a few more steps. Practice. Keep reminding students of the whole task. Stop often to summarize. Point to steps on a written list as they are demonstrated. Essential elements of a well-written teaching objective. What are some essential elements of a well-written teaching objective? It is stated in terms of what the student is to learn from instruction. It contains two parts, some content for students to learn and a process to show their learning. Important guidelines. What are some important guidelines to follow when planning instruction? Perform complete diagnostic assessments of students' needs and characteristics. Use diagnostic assessment information when planning. Do not rely entirely on uncritically on textbooks and their accompanying aids when planning. Include a combination of lower level and higher level expectations or learning outcomes. Include a wide range of instructional activities and strategies to fit your students' instructional needs. Match educational expectations or learning outcomes with teaching strategies, activities, and planned assessments. Recognize one's own knowledge and pedagogical limitations, and plan preferences. Include assessment strategies in instructional plan.